Hello, this is Neville Douglas from Ashanti Dutch Property Letting. It's the 24th of December 2017. We've come to a property to have a look at patterning on the wall. It's been recently refurbished 2 years ago, and ever since that date we've had increasing patination on the wall. I'll spin around. So we have the patination on the wall there, nothing to do with Star Trek, and what we're finding is that we have this patination on the wall, and it is not from another universe, it is from Staffordshire itself, Stoke-on-Trent. What we want to determine is if there are any dissolved salts in the water. If there are, then one, it's going to continue to attract moisture from the air and it is not going to dry out, or if there is any kind of works or water, which is behind the wall. So I know it's been refurbished. I haven't got schematics of the building, but there might be a pipe, might be some sort of leak. If you look at ground level, you just see there doesn't seem to be any dampness on the walls at the lower levels. So the only thing I can determine is that there's localised penetration through the wall. Now the outside brickwork has been treated with a, I suppose you could say, a cream which would stop any water penetration, but there is still some kind of issue. The cavities have also been cleared, and yet we still have issues within the building. So the next stage would be to do a more invasive test, to drill a hole through and maybe use a boroscope and have a look, but this is something that we'll consider for the new year. For now, we're just going to take some scrapings off there, and then when I get back home I'll analyse those scrapings and we'll see if it contains any nitrates and sulphates. Obviously if it's nitrates, then or sulphates, we'll be able to determine whether or not it's local clean potable water which is causing this, but I don't think it is looking at it, or whether or not it is groundwater which will contain traces of nitrates and sulphates. So I'm going to take a sample. Excuse me. So I'm going to put a sample into this pot, and then we're going to go back and then we will analyse to see if it's nitrates or sulphates. Thank you. Before we leave the site, I don't know if you can hear me okay because of the weather, we're just going to have a look on the outside. So I'm going to whiz the camera around and show you some of the works that have been done, and just to show you where the area is where we're getting the problems. So as you can see, this section of brickwork has been replaced. If we step back a little bit, we can see that that whole area there has been repointed. Also, there's been some bricks replaced there. To follow the damp course again, the damp course is vanishing. Just trying to see if there's evidence of a damp-proof course, but there isn't. I think this building was built before the 1880s, so I shall have to check. If it is, damp-proof courses were only introduced after about 1870s. There is another vent there for the subfloor. As we follow the damp-proof course all the way around to the side level again, you can see that there's a slight damp-proof course there. I don't know if you can see it. There we go. So there's a damp-proof course there again. It comes all the way along. Excuse the rubbish, steps up again, and then it's at a one brick height again, all the way around, following the wall, and then it vanishes again. So we have a drain here. The tenant's not complaining of any moisture ingress on this wall, and as you follow it along again, finally till the end, and just zoom out a little bit, you can see that there is a cable which should have been cut off. The hole should have been plugged. Okay, so there is sealant around it, but also you have a a ventilation brick again. I've got the sample back to the property. This is the sample. It says I should take a large spoonful. You won't see me in the camera, obviously, due to restrictions, but anyway, when I went to the property, I didn't feel it was appropriate to take too large a sample, as it was quite visible, and I didn't have a lot of time to gather the sample because family were there, so therefore I've taken a smaller sample. That said, if this is not conclusive, I'll go back and get a larger sample. So note to you, read the instructions carefully first before you go and gather samples, so you are aware of, I suppose you could say, the sample size that needs to be taken. So that's a note to myself. So basically, the first test that we are going to do is going to be testing for nitrates and then chlorides. Okay, so the first test is a nitrate test. So what we do, we get, this is distilled water, and this is the main, it's 60 cc's in there. We have our sample here. We tip that into the distilled water. So now we need to shake this vigorously for 30 to 40 seconds. So I'm going to switch this off and I'll come back to you in a moment once I've shaken the sample. Right, okay, now we're back. You can see that I've been shaking the sample vigorously, as it says. Now we transfer 10 centilitres from the first sample into the second sample. So make sure you have a steady hand. There we go. Brilliant. So put the cap back on that one. There's a little bit in there, a little bit too much. There we go. So cap back on this one to keep it safe. So now it says what we do is you put in tablet 1, which I have done, and once that is in place, we have to allow the tablet to dissolve. Okay, so put the cap on that, and as you can see, okay, and we'll let that stand now for 5 minutes. So I'll come back to you in 5 minutes time. Okay, hi. Right, we've returned back from the 5 minutes which was being allocated in regards to the nitrate test. I'm just going to put this pad down for you so you can see the colour. In actual fact, what they say, according to the instructions, is, I don't know if you can see that a little bit better with the piece of paper on the background there, so you can see the colours. They're saying if it's yellow, no nitrates are there. If it's a brown, there's traces of nitrate, and if it's a red, nitrates present in significant amounts. Now, this property was dry lined some 2 years ago, so I think if there was an analysis done of the original plasterwork that was there, I don't know if it's still there, but you would have found that there'd be higher concentrations of nitrates in the fabric of the building. So the next test that we're going to do now is going to be looking for chloride. Now, where do these nitrates and chloride come from? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in here, and this is a tablet which goes into there. Wash your hands after all of these. I would suggest getting some rubber gloves and things like that. I'm going to get some anyway. So this is shaken vigorously. And if it turns yellow, according to the instructions, and this is bearing in mind that I didn't use a full sample, as I said before, this was only a small sample due to not wanting to damage the plasterwork. If it turns yellow, then obviously they're saying that there is chloride in the wall. So if I put the pad back up again so you can see that, you just rest that there so you can see the background colour. You can see that that one is a brownish red, and the other sample there is a yellow, which points to there being chloride solution. So those are the constituent parts which are in the soil. Obviously you've got bacteria and other things which are in there, which will then migrate in with the dissolved salts in the subsoil, or what they call the fluid from the substrate. That migrates up the wall as it has done, and there is a classic textbook example of where these salts or how these salts have managed to mine. Okay, so if we look at the samples, we can see that there has been some change in both samples. These have settled a little bit, but obviously you can see that this one has gone yellow, which proves that there is chlorine in the water, and this one has gone, I suppose you could say, reddish brown. So that has definitely shown that there are nitrates and chloride in the water, which is typical of groundwater. So the tests were taken at about 1.5 meters, and we have obviously indications that there are chlorides and nitrates in the wall sample, which points to rising damp from somewhere. I'll also include an image a bit later on from one of the textbooks that I'm looking at, and it does show potentially what could be the issue with the particular subject property. It's pointing towards a plaster blob which might have been put on the wall, and the water moisture is migrating through the plastic blob, plaster blob, sorry, or dab as they call them, because they dab the plaster onto the wall and then they fix the plasterboard straight onto the dab. So it's something that you need to consider when you're refurbishing a property. You need to establish if there is any water in the walls first, and then if there is water in the walls, you need to be aware that, I'll just zoom that in for you a little bit, that there is a possibility that any moisture which is in the wall is going to be transferred across into any plasterboard that's there. The remedial action, I'm going to propose something, so I'm going to do some sketches, and then I'm going to speak to the owner of the property, subject property, and obviously come back with some solutions. So I think the next step is going to be to use a boroscope, which is in this box here. I'll show you what that is. Hope you can see that okay. So this is a boroscope, and this would then be introduced into the cavity of the building, and this would then allow you to look into the cavity just to determine if there is any obstructions, or the plaster dab is in the cavity as well. So I would use this in conjunction with another one which has got a camera, so it can record what is going on. So I think the next step is to make a small hole. I think this is something like 9mm, and this would be inserted into the cavity so that we can have a look. There is a lens which is here, which points up 90 degrees, and it gives you a 45-degree angle as well. So this will then allow you to look up into the cavity to see if there are any issues. So that's the next step.